Well, hello everyone. Ogre27 Kane here today, and I want to do a review of Super Mario RPG for the Nintendo Switch. Let's do an overview and figure out what this game is all about. So this is basically a complete one-to-one remake of the Super Nintendo release, partnered with Square Enix. It has exactly all of the same content, but a couple new bonus features such as a reworked audio track and new Game Plus features I'll mention. Not really a new Game Plus, but there are new bosses and new enemies to fight later on at the end. The game also features splash damage in the combat, which changes things a little bit more, and I would argue that this game is a tiny bit easier. It still has a good amount of difficulty, and if you haven't played the original and you're not prepared for some of the twists and turns it throws at you, it can definitely catch you off guard. This is not a very easy RPG, but it does have a very easy mode on it, which is pretty useful for most people who aren't familiar with this style of game. I believe this was done by Art de Piazza. I may have said that wrong, don't quote me on that, but I think they did an absolutely fantastic job, and it's totally worthy of the Nintendo moniker. The game runs very smooth, so let's start with the gameplay. So the gameplay in this is a story-driven turn-based RPG, and the story is a traditional Mario story, but it's actually a lot of fun, and one where it doesn't actually feature Bowser as your nemesis. He's actually on your team in this game. So on top of the story, you have a fantastic system, which is very much a tried and true turn-based system. There's no ATB or anything like that. And your characters have stats which directly correlate to the turn order at which you're playing. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention all the mini-games in this, because there are a ton of mini-games. Everything from swimming up and down a waterfall to barrel riding to some of the other crazy little mini-games in this. And they do feature different gameplay options. Most of them are action-based oriented, and a lot of them are timing-based, button presses and whatnot. So it does offer a little bit of variation and a little bit of tenseness to what would otherwise be a very slow-paced game. The last thing I really want to mention about the gameplay is the fact that it does have the two options of how to play. Whether you want to just enjoy the story and sit back and relax, or enjoy the entire game and play it through with all of its difficulty and crazy little spikes. Totally up to you. Let's move to the story now. Well, the story in this game starts out just like any other Mario game, with you trying to rescue Peach from Bowser. You go to his castle, you fight a few Goombas, you make your way to a chandelier. After breaking the chandelier, you and Bowser fall, and then a bunch of crazy stuff happens. A giant sword falls out of the sky, and you and Bowser are basically kicked out of his castle. The new antagonist in this game, Smithy, claims it for himself and sends his minions out into the world. You're seeing one of them here on the screen right now. And their goal, of course, is to take over the world. Bowser is forced to work with you, along with a few new characters such as Mallow, you're seeing here, and Geno and Princess Peach. Together, your team works to figure this out and save and repair the Star Road. The whole goal of this game is repairing the Star Road and saving the galaxy itself from all of the bad guys out in the universe. It's a pretty expansive story, and I agree they had to do something along these lines to get this RPG to have some sort of depth to its narrative. I don't really want to spoil too much more of the story, as the story in this game is actually really good, and the comedy is one of the high points of it. It has some really funny moments, even for as old as it is. So let's move on to the next category, the combat. Well, being a turn-based RPG, you expect a certain amount of simplicity. And at the time that this game came out, they were still experimenting with a lot of the ideas and concepts of turn-based RPGs. This game has its own unique twist, such as timing with button presses when you're doing different actions. Blocking has its own timing and button press. I really enjoy this because it forces you to stay completely invested in the battle. There were no moments in this game where I just sat there and hit the button. Even on the weakest enemies, I still chose to eradicate them as fast as possible, and a lot of that is done through timing and focus with the game. This element is pretty unique to Mario and its following sequels such as the Dream Team and other Mario and Luigi games. But I really wish that this would have been implemented in a lot of later RPGs after this, because you still don't really see this sort of concept, even in a turn-based RPG of today. The last thing I want to mention about combat is that while it does have a very traditional system of weapon and armor usage, some of the weapons you get are unique in their own right, and characters are not necessarily stuck to one type of weapon usage, such as Mario can use a green shell, which is a long-range weapon, and Mario can use a hammer, which is a close-range weapon. It really depends on your perspective and how you want to play the game with each character. So let's move on to controls and audio now. So the controls in this are pretty basic for what they are. You move around in the world with either the control stick or directional pad, and the A button basically confirms everything. Now when you get into battle, it's a little bit different, as each button does different things for you, such as your abilities that you're using or an attack or a block. But none of this is overcomplicated, and of course, per Nintendo style, they offer plenty of tutorials explaining everything you need to know. So let's talk about the audio now. So first and foremost, I do want to mention all the dialogue in this game is not spoken. You have to read bubbles above everyone's head. If that bothers you, then this is probably not the game for you. But all of the music, background, and sound effects are fantastic, so let's show some of it off. Now for graphics and animations. So after putting about 20 hours into it or so, I realized that the frame rate had something going on with it. Digital Foundry has a fantastic video explaining all of this, and it totally made sense to me after that. The game runs absolutely buttery smooth for a good deal of the game. It looks like it's running 60 frames a second. Every once in a while though, you'll see some weird hiccups where it drops as low as 30 frames a second. Now, on most other games this wouldn't be that jarring, but on a game like this, you will notice it. Luckily, this doesn't happen nearly as much as it did back on Link's Awakening. I would argue this only happened a couple of noticeable times, and a few smaller ones in between those. But none of this impacted my opinion on this whatsoever. And it's very stable, doesn't really impact the combat on it or your button presses. A lot of this occurs during cutscenes and other really graphically intensive moments for the game. So let's finish with the conclusion now. Well, in conclusion, I waited for this game since I heard about it at the Nintendo Direct. I knew that this was going to be one of my games of the year and definitely my favorite game of the season. It did not disappoint in any way, shape, or form. If you're expecting something brand new and a change and all kinds of other stuff, you're not going to see that. This is definitely a one-to-one remake of the Super Nintendo Classic, and I couldn't be happier myself. This is exactly what I wanted, and I feel like Nintendo heard me out. It's a beautiful game, and I hope you give it a try. This should put Nintendo in the right state of mind to keep giving us this kind of stuff, and fingers crossed, maybe one day we'll get Chrono Trigger. Good lord, that would be awesome. That's gonna do it for today, folks. Thank you for watching today's video. It was a blast to make. I upload every single Monday. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and have yourself a great rest of the day. This is Ogre27 Kane, signing out.